Well, on behalf of Landmark Ventures, I really want to thank you for coming to the summit. We've enjoyed being back here in the Bay Area. As you know, we've been taking this on the road in a few different cities over the last few years. Always great to be back in the Bay Area. And as you know, next year we'll be in Los Angeles. So definitely high on our list. Want to thank you for being a part of our family, coming time and time again to our events and the Social Innovation Summit. And we can't wait to see you next year in Los Angeles. We also want to thank our sponsors, our partners. So you've seen our partners, there you go. Little known fact, I have all of these tattooed on my back. The Comcast NBC Universal one hurt because the peacock. A lot of colors there. All right, let's get moving here. So thank you. We are now in session 8, the most exciting session you've ever had in your entire life, opportunity and outlook. So that basically means the future, right? Yes. I have been thinking about the future a lot, as we all have, in terms of the future of work, the future of innovation, the future of marketing, the future of education, the future of technology, the future of cats. There's a whole report coming out on the future of cats. It's just a buzzword right now, the future of everything, right? As I've been thinking about the future, and as people have been reading about it and writing about it and thinking about it and talking about it, I also think of the word community, right? When you think about the future, I think the future and the innovations that we come across are going to be driven by communities, meaning this community in the room here. We're a community of change makers, communities in cities, communities in families, etc. And I think the community is going to be relied upon more and more as we go into the future to figure out how to make decisions and how to find solutions. And I think part of that is really looking at it from two different angles, right? Do we, as we make these decisions and think about the future and figure out solutions, do we work within the system or do we change the system, right? And I think a lot of us want to work within the system, but sometimes these systems are really big and hard to change. And so we look outside of the system. When I was in college down the road at Berkeley, it's obligatory. Every time I come to the Bay Area, I have to say I went to Berkeley. I was a history of science major, so super geeky. And one of the books I read was the History of Scientific Revolutions, or the Structure of Scientific Revolutions, by Thomas Kuhn. And in that book, he pretty much laid out the theory behind paradigm shifts, right? Systemic change. And so there's normal science, where there's a theory that persists and everyone buys into over time. And sometimes in that normal science context, when decisions are made within that context, it doesn't always work out, right? Until someone comes along with what's known as a paradigm shift. So in science, you have the normal science approach and the paradigm shift. And so if you think back to your history books and you think of Copernicus, the Ptolemaic system of how the planets rotated around Earth was a little outdated, right? And so that was the normal science of the time. And then Copernicus came along and said, well, actually, things don't work out because of that theory. And so there's this paradigm shift or this systemic change in a new direction. The point I want to make, though, is that those things, because Copernicus thought about that, it doesn't just happen. And people just don't start thinking about it in a new way, or scientists don't start writing about it in books. It takes a community of scientists to come together and agree that that's the solution that they want to move forward with because it makes sense. It's logical, it's sound, it's reasonable, it can be proven. And so when I think of the future and our community and the communities that are solving some of these big things around systemic change, we really have to learn how to do these things as a community, whether it's scientists or whether it's civic-minded people or whether it's change makers. We really have to think about how to figure out the future and move either from that normal science way of thinking to that paradigm shift way of thinking. Bridgespan actually touched on this a couple years ago. You may have seen this article in Harvard Business Review around what does systemic change take, right? So we always think about, we want to solve education, we want to solve workforce development, we want to solve the skills gap. But truly, do we ever stop to think, as Kuhn said in these scientific revolutions, what's going to take a paradigm shift to completely change the theories behind education and skills gap and workforce development? And so Bridgespan stepped back and said there are 5 traits that are common in big systemic change movements, such as equal rights or reducing smoking or CPR, whatever it might be. And I want to list those out as we think about today's session, opportunity and outlook. So 1, you need to build a shared understanding of the problem and its ecosystem. 2, create emotionally compelling, winnable milestones. 3, design for massive scale. 4, drive, don't assume demand. 5, embrace course correction. So I'm not going to go through all of those, but according to them and their study and talking to a ton of change makers and revolutionaries, if you will, those are the 5 traits that they said matter when thinking about big systemic change campaigns. So as we look to opportunity and outlook, as you go away from here thinking about the change that you want to create back home, think of those 5 things and think about scientific revolutions and how to create a paradigm shift. It's not just you. It's a community of scientists. It's a community of change makers that needs to come together to agree on that. And I feel like, and this is just my personal opinion, we probably don't spend enough time on that. We think how individually we can hammer a tank rather than thinking collectively how we create some of these paradigm shifts. So as we hear speakers today talk about opportunity and outlook, let's keep in mind how our community is going to come together for paradigm shifts around our revolutions and systemic change. Really excited about this session. We have some powerhouse friends and speakers joining us. We want to start off with Gary Shapiro, so I thought we'd change it up a little bit and do 2 truths and a lie. You can figure out which one is the lie, and I'm a great liar. 1, represents more than 2,200 tech companies and produces CES, which if you've ever been to Vegas in January, you've probably seen a few people around for that. 2, is a New York Times bestselling author on innovation and the American dream. Or 3, he does not know how to use his DVR at home to record The Bachelorette. So please welcome Gary to the stage.